I wanted to welcome you this morning. My name is Heather Long, and I'm the Director of Family Support Services here at the ARC of San Antonio, and welcoming you to our second webinar in a series of 4 that we have. And the title of our series is Special Education 101. We have leading educational advocates and consultants who are bringing us a wealth of their knowledge regarding advocacy, transition, autism, specific supports. But today's session, we are focusing on parent advocacy when it relates to education. And we are so thankful for the funding that we receive from the Harvey E. Najam Charitable Foundation and the Mays Family Foundation that allows us to put together these presentations. So just some housekeeping. Everybody's microphone is muted and the videos are turned off just to help us with recording. So if you do have a question during the session, go ahead and put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I will be looking at those, and at the end of the presentation, we'll share those questions with Sylvia. We are recording the session, so just be aware of that, and we do follow HIPAA procedures, and because we're recording this, we just ask that you do not put any private information in the chat or the Q&A. Following our presentation, we're going to send you out a link to the session. It'll also include the link to previous sessions that we provided. Also a survey to help us with future presentations. So I want to welcome our speaker this morning, Sylvia Farber. I've known Sylvia for many, many years, and Sylvia is the founder of 101 Advocacy. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Special Education and Elementary Education from the Florida Southern College and Master's degree in Special Education from Florida State University. She has over 10 years experience in various special education settings, including a classroom teacher, special education department head, and an alternative certification instructor. She's been helping families here in the San Antonio area navigate the special education process since 2008. And Sylvia, she's a mother of 3 children, one precious girl with developmental disabilities as well. So I'll go ahead and turn this over to you, Sylvia.
Well, hello. Thank you guys for joining in today. We're going to get to talk about one of my favorite things, IEPs and arts. I know not everybody can say that, but I love them. So I'll start with giving a Zoom presentation is one of my least favorite things to do because there's no interaction between me and the audience. And so I'm talking to my computer screen. If I try to make a joke, it's crickets. And so it does become challenging for me to do this. And so hopefully I'll do this well, and hopefully you'll find my humor funny. And if not, I'll never know. So thank you, Heather, for that introduction. And just to kind of elaborate a little bit more, I have sat and worn hats from every aspect of the ARD table. I have worn the hat as a teacher, I've worn the hat as a parent, and I wear the hat as an advocate. So wearing that hat from those 3 different perspectives, I think has really given me a lot of insight into how to help these meetings go well and how to help maintain positive relationships. I do a similar presentation for staff members about how to have positive relationships with parents. And so I think, having this presentation here about strategies for advocating while maintaining a positive relationship, I think hopefully you'll find value in that going into your next ARD meeting. So I hope at the end of this meeting, like I said in this slide here, I love IEPs, that maybe your next presentation, you'll love IEPs too and have a more successful meeting. So it's something that if you don't know, just to give you a little bit of background or a tidbit of knowledge, is that Texas is the only place that calls them ARDs. And so if you didn't know that, the rest of the country calls them IEPs, individualized education plans. But in Texas, because we do things differently here, we're the only ones that call them ARDs. So if you didn't know that, you learned something today. So This is probably how a lot of parents feel going into that meeting. And I don't want this to be you at your next meeting. You can leave your weapons and your alcohol and your strong prayers at home, because hopefully I'm going to equip you well to have that next meeting be more successful. So some tips that I have for trying to maintain that relationship while advocating, because sometimes people think that advocating is adversarial. I don't believe that's the case. I don't think that advocating has to be adversarial in nature. I think that you can maintain positive relationships through advocacy. And so I have some tips for you. Prior to the ARD meeting, make sure that all your email communication uses the same tone as verbal communication. So what I mean by that is, and Facebook has really kind of taught us the term keyboard warrior. And so really making sure that when you get some upsetting news or you have a strong question, that you're using a tone in your email that you would use the same in your verbal communication, so that you're not writing in all caps, you're not communicating with a tone that displays anger, because all of those communications do lead to what that relationship is going to look like. And so I just think that when you're looking to email communication, just really think, how would you say that in a one-on-one verbal communication, and make sure your email communication has that same tone as the verbal communication. So then that gets into verbal communication, making sure your verbal communication is respectful. And when I kind of think about verbal communication and what is the line for respectful, what is the line for kind, what is the line for friendly, I kind of ask myself, would I say that to my grandmother in that tone or with those words? Would I say that to my pastor with that tone or with those words? And if I wouldn't, then I probably need to change my choice of words, my tone of voice with that verbal communication. And so that's kind of the line that I use when I'm looking at, is my communication what it needs to be, so that we continue in this positive relationship with staff. All right, and then you need to be prepared. So all of this is prior to the ARD. You're not yet in an ARD, but these are the things prior to any ARD meeting that you need, that I suggest that you do, so that those relationships remain positive. And so what does being prepared look like? And so when you're more prepared, you're going to be less surprised, right? And so when you're less surprised, then your emotions are able to be more in check. And so before any meeting, and then at least 4 times a year, there's something called the IEP progress report. And an IEP progress report gives you information on how your child is progressing on their goals and objectives. And so my suggestion is to ask for that. They have to provide that IEP progress report to you. That's a given. But sometimes it's late. And so you just need to send a friendly reminder for that information, or that if you're not in a regularly scheduled time to receive that information, but you need that information in order to prepare for an upcoming meeting, then you can ask for that information. And a key piece to that is to make sure that all reporting periods are in that IEP progress report. So sometimes if it's like right now, we're at the end of a grading cycle. Most districts are at the end of a grading cycle. And so you'll get that IEP progress report. And if it only has a March date with progress report, I don't think that's enough information to help you really understand your child's progress. So all reporting periods would be from the last annual through the current time frame. So if you had an annual in May of last year, there would be a reporting period then at the end of the school year last year. There'd be another reporting period if they're on a 9-week period in October, another reporting period January, December-ish, and then a March reporting period. So all of those reporting periods on one document. So when those reporting periods are on one document, that allows you to review progress over time. That allows you to look from grading period to grading period to see, has there been any regression in skills? That allows you to look at, is there a stall in progress? Or is there steady progress? And so when you look at that IEP progress report and you look at the historical data from all reporting periods that really gives you a good idea of your child's progress and whether that progress is sufficient or whether an ARD needs to be held to discuss the child's progress because there's concerns regarding regression or a stall of progress. So make sure that you ask for an IEP progress report that includes all reporting periods. And then you also ask for that progress report to include data-driven information. And so if that IEP progress report has a progress code of 70% or 33% or whatever, and then it has a comment that says, Johnny's doing well, keep up the good work. There's, excuse me. There's no data in Johnny's doing well, keep up the good work. So the data needs to be reported to you on how did we get to that 70%. So if the goal says in 4 out of 5 trials, then you should have some data that shows in those 5 trials, trial 1, he did 33%, trial 2, he did 54%, trial 3, and so on. And so that you see the data specific to the trials that are required within that specific goal. So it's really important when you look at that progress note, that progress note you're going to look at in relationship to what is that goal expectation. So is the goal expectation 70% in 4 out of 5 trials? Is it 80% in 2 trials? What is that? What is the expectation in the goal, and what is the progress code in relationship to that goal? If there's not any data in there, then you need to request that data, because that's going to help you be able to make some decisions going forward on whether your child has regression, a stall of progress, or steady progress. And with information, you're able to be a strong advocate, and with information, you're able to not be surprised. And so that's what oftentimes happens, is sometimes parents get surprised at these meetings, and then relationships break down, trust breaks down. And so in order to prevent a surprise at the meeting, asking for this information at each reporting period, asking for this information prior to any ARD meeting is going to help you not be surprised, and therefore help with that relationship. So you can ask those questions, you can have that dialogue prior to an ARD meeting, you can have that conversation with the teacher. I'm concerned, where's the data here? And then the teacher can, present to you where that data is. Or if for some reason there's not any data, then that's a strong conversation that you can have prior to going to an ARD meeting and being surprised by that information. So some other things about being prepared. So when you're going to an ARD meeting, you're going to want to ask for a full draft of the ARD document. Anytime that I go to an ARD meeting, I always compare the last document to the draft document to look at, are there any changes between the document and what changes are being proposed, so that we can have a conversation about those changes if I have concerns about those changes, if I'm not sure that my child's ready for that change, or to give up that accommodation, or to have that less support. And so when you compare document to document, that really allows you to see where are the proposals, where are the changes. Oh, I'm sorry. And so then when you, my son is supposed to be taking care of the dogs, and clearly he's not doing that. No, hold on one second, please. I'm sorry. No. My apologies. Let me get back to where we were at. So asking for that full draft of the ARD document, comparing document to document, is going to help you to not have any surprises as well when you go into that ARD meeting. And I think that really is a big thing for helping to maintain relationships, is not to have surprises. Because when you have a surprise, then that tends to break down trust. And so really being proactive so that you're not surprised at these meetings, I think really is a strong help for maintaining that positive relationship. So sometimes districts don't like to give the full draft, I would always suggest you ask for the full draft of the R document, but at a minimum, you need the present levels, which is also called the PLAFs, and the goals. The present levels is the information that tells you how your child is currently functioning, and that information helps to drive the development of the goals. And so the present levels needs to be data-driven information as well. It needs to, not just have behavioral information like Johnny's doing great, I love having him in class. He's, that's not data-driven information. That doesn't tell me how he's doing in reading. That doesn't tell me how he's doing in math. So make sure that those present levels really reflect data-driven information as well. How is he doing in that specific curriculum, so that that information helps drive the goals? And then also, well, I've just said that, review the present levels to ensure that it's data driven. And then after you review those PLAFs, and again, the PLAFs is what you use to drive the goals. And so the PLAF statements tell you what his present levels are, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and then that information is used to drive the goals, but the goals need to be measurable and specific. And measurable and specific in such a way that you are really able to gauge progress. And so, this I could spend, an all-day session on teaching how to write measurable specific goals. And so clearly we don't have the time to do that today, but when you write measurable and specific goals, it is very clear on what the data should look like. And you need to kind of think through that, when it says 70%, 4 out of 5 trials, does that make sense? And how can you collect the data and report the data? And so, for instance, if it says, that Johnny's going to, I use this as an example in it all the time, just so people can kind of really get it, that 70% of the time, Johnny's going to cross the street successfully. So that means 30% of the time, it's okay that he gets hit by a bus. No, so that doesn't make any sense to write a goal in that way. Nobody would expect that that's an okay outcome for Johnny to get hit by the bus 30% of the time. So the goals need to make sense in the way that you're going to collect data. And measurable means that we know what the data should look like 4 out of 5 times, 2 out of 3 times, and can we collect data in that way? And so sometimes behavioral goals are written and, Johnny's going to stay on task for 15 minutes, 5 out of 7 times in a grading period. Okay, so if we just look at a normal grading period of 9 weeks, that's 5 days a week. So that's 45 days, 45 opportunities for Johnny to be on task for 15 minutes. But if we write Johnny's going to be on task for 15 minutes, 5 out of 7 times, there's 45 opportunities for Johnny to be successful. So is it good progress for Johnny to be on task only 5 of those 45 opportunities? To me, that's not good progress. And so I wouldn't write the goal in that way, because that's not good progress, that he's only going to be on task for 15 minutes 5 times when there's 45 days that he can be on task for. So that's how you need to look at goals again, so you're not surprised when you come to the ARD meeting and then they say, well, Johnny made progress at, he can be on task for 15 minutes 5 times. But then you still hear all the teachers saying, well, Johnny has a hard time focusing. Johnny's never on task. I have to tell Johnny to, get back on task, 3 times a day. Well, they're still having a lot of concerns and problems with that, because he was only expected to do it 5 times when there's 45 opportunities for him to do so. So I think sometimes families get surprised again with progress or lack of progress, because the goals weren't written very measurable or very specifically, so that progress is really obtained. So again, this writing goals measurable and specifically, that is, that's a long session. So I could spend, several hours trying to help with that. So that's just kind of the overview, and just really looking at that goal. What is the behavior that's expected in the goal? Can you see the behavior? So things like Johnny will learn, you can't see learn. So that's not a good verb to have in the goals because I can't see his learning, but Johnny will solve 2-digit by 4-digit multiplication problems. I can see that. There's a work sample that can show me whether Johnny can solve 3-digit by 4-digit problems. So I can see that. So that's where the specific part of it comes into, and the measurable part of it. Can I see the skill that we're trying to develop? Johnny will decode with 95% accuracy. Johnny will decode level 16, DRA level 16 books with 95% accuracy. So when we look at progress, I'm going to know if he met his goal that he was given DRA 16 books. So that's the books that he should be given, not DRA 4. And if we don't identify the level, then it could be DRA 4. It could be DRA 38. But when you identify the level, then you know that that's what his progress should be based on, is that DRA 16. So DRA 16 with 95% accuracy. So that's an example of a specific thing that we can have a work sample from and be able to judge progress. So Johnny will increase his decoding ability isn't something that we can measure specifically, because increases decoding ability from what? Increases decoding ability to what? And so that's where you really want those very specific things to be in there. So if the word increase, and increase is good, we want an increase, right? But increase from what, increase to what? And that's how you get something very measurable and specific. And again, how you help to prevent surprises with lack of progress, or concerns about what the progress looks like, because the goal wasn't written in a way that he could only be on task for 5 times out of a 45-day period and say he's mastered the goal, when mastery really should be more than 5 times in 45 days. So again, just really look to make sure that those goals are measurable and specific. And if they're not, then have that conversation with the staff prior to the ARD meeting, because it's easier to work out those details with the teacher prior to the ARD meeting, before you get into an ARD meeting where there's, 8 people, however many people come to your ARD meetings. I've been in ARDs with 20 plus people, but that's not the norm. But usually, there's 5 to 8 people in an ARD meeting. And so it's easier to really have these conversations about the draft prior to that ARD meeting and kind of work out some of these details with the teacher. And so that goes to this bullet that I just put up there. As you review the draft, as you review the goals, then you share your thoughts, questions, suggestions, new thoughts in advance of the meeting. Again, working with that teacher in advance of the meeting helps. So when you are in that meeting, some of these things have already been worked out, so it becomes a non-issue. And so you really want to work out as much as you can prior to the ARD meeting. It helps the ARD meeting be more efficient, for one. And then I think it really helps to maintain that positive relationship, because you're not in a room full of 5 to 8 other people trying to hash things out. You're hashing them out in advance with the person who knows your child best, the teacher. But I do think you need to share your concerns and your thoughts in advance, because just like you don't want surprises, it's not a good idea to surprise them either. Surprises, I think, breaks down relationships. And so that's why I really think being prepared is key to trying to maintain that relationship. And sharing your thoughts, questions, concerns, suggestions in advance really helps, first, to try to work out those things prior to the ARD meeting, so the ARD meeting can be more efficient. And then you're working that out with the 2 people that know your child best, parent and teacher. Those are the 2 people in the ARD meeting that know the child best. So working out those things with the people that know your child best is really the best strategy. And then it also prevents to not have surprises in that meeting. So then now we've done all this preparation in advance of the ARD meeting, and now you're going to the ARD meeting. So what can you do to maintain that positive relationship while you're going into that ARD meeting? Leave the bulldog at home. So I think that advocacy has that adversarial tone. It doesn't need to have that adversarial tone. Advocacy can be positive. Just remember to check the bulldog, leave the bulldog at home, and don't bring the bulldog to the ARD meeting. Bring snacks. I think that helps to just make things just be a little bit more friendly, a little bit more open. And so every single ARD meeting that I go to with my daughter, I bring snacks. I don't bring them as an advocate because then, that would be pretty substantial. But as a parent, I always bring snacks to the meeting. I think it just really kind of helps set a tone for a friendlier atmosphere. And it doesn't have to be anything substantial. Bring a box of donuts. It doesn't have to be anything great, just a little something to say thank you for all the efforts that you do. And it's just a token of appreciation and helps just set the tone for a more friendlier meeting. Okay, and so when we go back to you're preparing for the ARD meeting, you're writing your list of questions and concerns, things that still need to be addressed, and don't just put that up here and think you're going to get those things all addressed. Make sure that you have that printed and you bring that with you, because there are oftentimes going to be bunny trails that we go on because we start talking about one specific thing and that leads us talking to about another specific issue, and then we don't come back to the original issue, and then it doesn't get addressed. And so if you have your issues and concerns printed, then you're able to go and check that, yes, we address that concern. Yes, we address that question. And even though you may go down some other tangent, it allows you to come back and make sure the original question has been addressed. Okay, another thing that I think is important is to share a vision statement. I think when you share a vision statement, it really helps to have the ARD committee focus on what is important to you and what is important to your child. And I think it really kind of helps the ARD committee really see beyond the right now and see your child in the future. And this vision statement here, I adapted it from inclusive schooling, but this is a vision statement that we've used for our daughter and that we share at the meetings. And I do feel like when you share your vision with the ARD committee, that when you have difficult conversations, when you have requests that maybe the district is not as receptive to, then coming back to the vision statement and pointing to how does the things I'm requesting help accomplish this vision statement. I really think that helps the committee to kind of see a connection to what you're asking for and how that helps to accomplish the vision. So if you're just asking for more speech time, we want more speech. We want, 18 sessions of speech. Okay, why? But if we tie that request to the vision statement about why is communication so important for my child, because we want these things for my child and communication is critical to obtaining this future outcome, that is why we want an increase in speech. So I think when you're able to share it, create a vision statement and share a vision statement, I think that it helps when you're trying to ask for things that a campus may not feel is necessary. And then you tie that to how those requests tie to the vision statement, tie to what's important to you and your child in the future. The decisions that are made today, the decisions that are made in kindergarten, the decisions that are made in third grade, those decisions do impact the decisions when your child's no longer in school. And so really thinking, it's sometimes hard to think about your child in kindergarten and what is the outcome. And that may change, right? Your vision statement may change from kindergarten to fifth grade, from fifth grade to eighth grade. Your vision may change. But in kindergarten, what is the vision that you have for your child? Even though it may change in the future, at this moment in time, this is the vision I have, and how are we going to help set my child up to be able to accomplish this vision? And knowing that it's not set in stone, it can change at any time as your child changes. As you change, the vision may change. Let's see. The next thing, so now you're at the ARD meeting. So at the ARD meeting, sometimes you'll put in a request and you'll hear the word no. I like to approach the no that usually more information is needed. So usually they don't understand my request. Usually they don't understand how that request ties to the vision that I have for my child. So there's usually something more that I can explain, more information that I can provide to help them understand the request. So, and how we kind of come about getting through why do we have a no is asking more questions, because there's usually a reason for the resistance to do what you're asking for. So understanding why they're not feeling like what you're asking for is necessary, so a line of questioning, and then also making sure that you explain how what you're asking for aligns to the vision that you have for your child. How is that necessary for your child's individualized education? And so those things are key, right? Because this is an individualized plan. And so how does what you're asking for tie to the individualized needs of your child? And so helping to provide more information and asking questions to get to where the resistance is usually helps us to move beyond the no. And, really the school staff, they do also want what's best for your child. I know sometimes parents feel like they're against them, but really nobody went into teaching to say, how can I screw up this child's life? How can I make these parents angry? Nobody goes into teaching with those motives. So staff really do want what's best for your child. It's just that sometimes they don't have the same vision that you have for your child. And so that's why, again, I think it's critical to create that vision statement so you can help the staff understand the vision. I mean, the vision that we have for our child is for her to go to college. It's a non-degreed program, but we want her to go on to college and experience that to gain additional skills while she's in college, even though she has an intellectual disability. Not all people, even special educators, are able to wrap their brains around a student with an intellectual disability going on to college. And so their resistance to some of the things we may ask for isn't because they don't like me, like my child, want to just sabotage everything. It's that they haven't been able to wrap their brains around some of the things that is in my vision. And so sharing the vision and helping them come alongside that vision helps them to maybe change their position some, help them see things in a different way, help them see that, oh, college is a possibility for students with intellectual disabilities. I mean, that's a relatively new concept. And so helping people understand that that's a viable option is a piece to help them coming alongside you, instead of looking at they're just fighting you, they're just resistance to you because they just don't want to do anything good for your child. I really don't think that's the case. They do want what's best for your child. Sometimes we're just not on the same page of what that looks like. And so helping them come alongside you and understanding what your vision is, I think helps that situation. Um, you do have to be willing to compromise. If you're asking for 12 sessions of speech and they say 15, you have to be willing to compromise. You want them to come up, but you have to be willing as well to compromise. And if it's only your way, that's not going to be helpful in maintaining a positive relationship. Some things, maybe not, you're not willing to compromise on, but I think you really have to consider what are the things that you are willing to compromise and be willing to compromise. So if your child was at 12 sessions of speech, you wanted 18 sessions of speech, and you got to 15 sessions of speech. Okay, that's a compromise. I would be willing to accept that as a compromise, and then I would review the data. Is the data sufficient that 15 sessions was adequate for my child to make progress? Is the 15 sessions working to get me to my ultimate goal? And if after 15 sessions it's not working, my child's not making enough progress, then you can go back and ask for the 18 sessions. But I think you do have to be able to compromise and identify those areas, those requests that you're making, and where are you willing to compromise. Usually when there is a request that is made and compromise is given, usually you can get the school district to agree to all right, let's do this, collect data and come back and revisit. And so oftentimes that's our approach is, all right, you don't want to do everything that we're asking for. So let's do this, let's collect some data, and then we'll come back and revisit. So making that suggestion usually is a good approach to getting someone to make a compromise, is asking for something to be increased. Let's collect some data, then come back and review. Okay, so now you're also needing to remember to smile. So these meetings can be challenging. I get it. Early on in my daughter's ARD meetings, I don't think that there was one that I didn't cry at. And not because they were difficult and hard, but we're talking about my baby. And even though I do this, when I do this every day for other families, and I don't cry in these meetings as an advocate, but when I would go to my meetings for my daughter, there were lots of them early on that I cried in. And so it's hard stuff, right? We're talking about weaknesses, we're talking about disability, we're talking about challenges. So it's hard stuff. So we need to remember to smile and need to remember that our emotions are really, really, really high. And we need to try to keep those emotions, to recognize going in that our emotions are going to be high, and how can I keep those emotions more stable so that we can maintain relationships. So smiling is a good way to help everybody just know we're moving positively. So don't let this face happen to you. So continuing at the ARD meeting, there are times when you're not able to come to an agreement. And just because you're not able to come to an agreement doesn't mean that this relationship is doomed and this relationship is over and I wash my hands of you. We cannot continue on in a positive relationship. I'm in disagreed ARDs regularly, and we can still maintain positive relationships even through disagreement. So if you're not able to come to an agreement, remember you left that bulldog at home, right? So you're not able to come to an agreement. We still don't need to get adversarial. We still don't need to get angry. We still don't need to beat our chest and insist upon our way, because those things aren't going to be effective strategies. It just never works. It never works to raise your voice. It never works to use language. Those things just don't work. So if you're not able to come to an agreement, recess the ARD. It's not a big deal. Everybody sometimes needs time to stop and consider other ideas, to consider other proposals. Again, emotions are crazy high, right? And so if you are able to just recess the ARD, sometimes coming back, those emotion levels on both sides level out and you're able to come to an agreement just simply by taking a break. Taking a break from the ARD isn't a bad thing. And when you take those breaks, you can ask for a district representative to attend the next meeting. Sometimes having another perspective, having another personality come into the meeting helps to navigate the difficulties and helps the committee to come to an agreement. Know that, kind of going back to recessing the ARD when emotions are high, that arguments don't change people's mind. Even just look at Facebook and everything. When someone goes as a keyboard warrior, they're not changing people's mind from their position. All they're doing is further dividing the situation. And so making a divide in the relationship. So arguments usually don't change people's mind, and especially public arguments. So when you're at an impasse, you're at a disagreement, it's best to just recess. I'm not going to change someone's mind by yelling at them. I'm not going to change someone's mind by just continuing to restate my same position over and over and over and over again. So sometimes if you take a break, in that break, people may change their mind, because people change their mind usually after they have time to reflect. And it's usually when that reflection is done privately. So that's the benefit of the recessed ARD. It allows people, including the parent, including us, it allows us to reflect. It allows us time. It allows the schools time to change their mind privately. Nobody will it rarely works that you're going to change somebody's mind by argument, especially a public argument. So again, taking that recess, taking that time so that everybody can reflect and hopefully, come to some different ideas, some different proposals, some different suggestions on how to come to an agreement. And if you're still not able to come to an agreement when you come back to that meeting, then make sure that the school district is documenting the refusal to provide whatever it is that you're asking for, that they're documenting that in PWN, because that's going to be necessary and helpful should you have to continue on through any other exercising your due process rights. And then also sometimes so kind of just like going back to the earlier conversation about communication, when you're asked, and the school district is required to put a refusal in writing. So if they're refusing to do something, any refusals are required to be put in writing through the PWN, and that's prior written notice. So that's a requirement. But sometimes it's neglected. And when you ask for the refusal to be put in the PWN, for the refusal to be put in writing, sometimes that gives pause. Sometimes that gives pause to, do we really want to put this refusal down in writing? Or maybe should we continue talking about it? And so I think that sometimes helps the committee to continue talking about what is the area of disagreement and how can we come to an agreement and maintain relationships while doing so. So again, I think that really the biggest thing you can do is just to try to be gentle in your approach, to try to be collaborative in your approach. Advocacy doesn't have to be adversarial. In my opinion, advocacy should not be adversarial, because I don't think you're going to get you'll have as much progress in an adversarial nature than you will in a collaborative and a gentle nature, and approaching the staff members as people who do want what's in your child's best interest as well. We just may have a different idea of that long-term vision. So kind of coming together and really helping them understand what your vision is for your child, I think ultimately helps in coming together in agreements in the long run. But again, the gentle collaborative approach is always going to be more successful than the adversarial attack approach. I hope that you got some good tidbits on how to kind of approach your next meeting in a non-confrontational adversarial way. And I'm happy to take some questions now, Heather, if there are any.
We did. We had a question pop up here in the chat. It's from Delia Vidal, and she says, my daughter has had 2 different speech therapists, so every year the goals change. Are they supposed to keep previous goals?
So there is no yes or no answer to that. It really is, what is the progress on those previous goals? And so if she didn't meet those goals, then it may be appropriate to revise those goals to a higher expectation because she didn't completely meet those goals. But if she met those goals, then yes, it's appropriate to come up with new goals. So I don't have an exact yes or no answer for you. It really depends on the progress. And again, that IEP progress report is so critical in helping you understand where your child is at, where your child needs to go. And so depending on what that progress on the previous goals was, that will help you determine what kind of new goals you should expect. So new goals, if they've met the goals, sure, that's very appropriate. But if they didn't meet the goals, there may be a need to revise the goals in a different way. And then sometimes we write goals and then we realize that wasn't a good goal. We needed to go back a step, or that was a too low of a level goal, so we need to go advance. So sometimes it is appropriate to just say, okay, we're going to discontinue that goal. We're not going to use that goal anymore because we've determined that that goal isn't appropriate any longer. So that's also reasonable for the ARD committee to determine that that goal just isn't necessary anymore. But you are a part of that ARD committee. So if you have concerns about what about these goals, and are we going to continue to work on these goals, that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. But there's not, I can't give you a simple answer, yes or no, because there's so many factors that go into that. But hopefully that elaboration helped.
Great. So just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. Actually, I have a question, or I just want to see if you can elaborate a little bit. Just, this past year with COVID and everything being virtual, what have you found to be the most challenging things for families in terms of the virtual and advocating? Have you found that it's been harder for families to advocate during this time when it's virtual, or do you feel like in person is better? What has been your experience?
I do find that it's been more challenging this year because there's a lot of, I mean, and it is true, right, that the virtual world makes things more complicated, but I feel like a lot of, we're using virtual learning as an excuse for a lot of whatever. And so I think we need to kind of get beyond virtual as being the excuse for why there's no progress, virtual being the excuse for why there's not enough support, virtual being the excuse for why we aren't changing goals. So we need to get beyond virtual learning as the excuse for why we aren't doing something to, okay, virtual learning is a challenge, but we still have to make progress. Virtual learning is a challenge, but we still need to support the child. Virtual learning is a challenge, but we still need to provide adequate instruction. And so I think we need to get beyond it as being an excuse and, okay, yes, it's challenging, but we still have to do that. And so, yes, Heather, I think that virtual learning has been more challenging for families, but it's still possible to advocate for services. I mean, it's hard, and no doubt about it that it's hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Great. We did have another question come in, Sylvia, from I hope I'm saying that correctly. The triennial IEP has been due. Instead of just an educational evaluation, I requested a full evaluation and expected to have something happen in the first week of April when the 60 days was reached, but I haven't heard anything yet. Is there anything a parent can or should I do?
So this is a challenging topic because clearly when COVID happened last spring, school districts are still, kind of hemorrhaging from all of that last spring. So all those evaluations were due last spring and nothing happened last spring. So they had all those evaluations to do to make up from last spring, and then all the evaluations that are still due this year. So clearly that's a hardship for districts, period. And I get that fully. But TEA did not extend any of the timelines for evaluation due dates. So evaluation due dates still exist. They're still in place. So some districts are putting in language that says we may not be able to meet the timeline because of COVID, but TEA hasn't extended those deadlines. So technically that's not a real thing because those deadlines still exist. So I would just, have that conversation and asking the questions. Again, not being accusatory, but asking the question. I haven't heard about, the status from this evaluation that was requested. Where are we at in this process? And so just asking the questions and, telling them that you do desire to have this evaluation meeting as soon as possible. Is there anything that's hindering that because you expected that meeting to be done in April and that date is approaching? Are we on track for that? If we're not on track for that, what's holding us up? And then trying to find out the answers to that so that you can get beyond the holdup.
That's great. They say thank you. That was great advice. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, Sylvia, but I just want to thank you. There's some really great takeaways from today for me just to share with families too, as far as that mission or vision statement. That's such a great way to really direct everything. And so I really love that suggestion. And then also just to not have any surprises before the meetings. And that's, all preparation, right?
Yeah, surprises are really only good at 40th birthday celebration.
Or 50th. Yeah, yeah. Well, Sylvia, we don't have any other questions, so I think you answered everybody's question. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, we've recorded the session. We'll be providing the PowerPoint and a link to this session in a follow-up email. And also, we'll share a link that has previous sessions that we've been providing here at the ARC. Again, we're just very thankful for the Harvey E. Najam Charitable Foundation and the Mays Foundation for making all these webinars possible. Our next session will be on Friday, April 16th, and our presenter will be Anissa Moore, an educational consultant and a board-certified behavior analysis. She'll be presenting on the autism supplements within the IEP and specifically what that means. So again, I want to thank you for joining us, and keep an eye out for that follow-up email. And we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Bye-bye.
Bye.